What's your story on flashing people or being flashed by someone? NSFW. I was about 12 on a day trip to Mexico with my mum and aunt from Arizona. Sitting behind passenger seat, my aunt told me to close my eyes. I did, and then I opened them to see her cannons halfway out the window flashing a semi-driver. I didn't know what to think. I guess your aunt was well endowed. In college, early freshman year, I'm drunkenly walking to some gathering or another. 3 girls were in a second-story dorm window, yelled at me to look up. I look up, they flash me. I drunkenly and happily yell thanks. They look at me like I'm crazy, say, "Did you just say thanks?" I drunkenly shout yup, and go on my way. If it wasn't for the booze, that'd probably be one of those incredibly awkward memories that haunt me forever, but instead I got a good chuckle and saw some boobs. Wasn't necessarily for me, but I saw my first pair of glorious boobs when I was 12 at a Warped Tour waiting for the last band, which was Social Distortion. Best show I have ever seen to date. Warped Tour nudity. There was a girl who was crowd surfing during Tiger Army. I was working the barricade, and every time she came up, her punk rock uniform studded mini skirt would be a little worse, until the third time when it was barely on. She rolled over while on the crowd, and her dress went all the way up, nothing underneath. Her cheeks spread wide to the sun. Her angry, reddened, 12 hours in the hot sun beehole looking directly into my soul. It was an angry god. That was my last Warped Tour. Was it your first pair of boobs and they happened to be glorious, or had you only seen average boobs up until that point? Well, first pair I had ever seen in person, and they were huge, double Ds or bigger, so they were pretty glorious to me regardless. But I vividly remember she was on someone's shoulders, so was I, a guy friend of my older sister. She was hot and I was feeling a little hot and bothered myself after that. So I'm now pretty sure I had a half chub pressing on my sister's friend's neck at that point. When I was in 8th grade, I rode the bus home from school. Every now and then the guys that sat in the back, including me, would make a sign saying "Flash us, show us your boobs," etc., and hold it up to the back glass. We probably did this 50 times until one day there was a car behind us with 2 college-aged girls in it. They saw the sign and laughed, which was a typical response, but then something magical happened. The passenger actually did flash us, and to top it off, the driver gave her a squeeze. That was 20 years ago and I still remember what she was wearing. Surprise boobs make a serious impression on a young man. Surprise boobs definitely make an impression. I was a little younger than you and I had never seen a boob before. This was pre-internet days, but naturally I was very curious about them. I used to wake up really early in the morning to watch cartoons before school. One day I was flipping through the channels at about 6 AM and I came across a National Geographic special about some tribe in the Amazon or Africa on PBS. Boobs. It was a very brief glimpse, but I remember it like it was yesterday. They really were rather nice actually, not what you might be stereotypically thinking. When I was in high school, my friend pantsed me during PE. He pulled my underwear down too. Probably half the class got a full frontal view. I cannot imagine your embarrassment. You ever return the favor? Apparently my dad was dancing naked at my mom being a dork, and he looked left and the neighbors were staring open-mouthed through their window into my parents' window. So my dad dove like Superman across the bed to get away from the window, but overshot it and slid off the bed. My mum loves telling this story. Wasted opportunity to helicopter that shit at the neighbors. Traumatize them even more for being peeping toms. My first road trip on a motorcycle. I was 16ish and took an hour drive south with a friend and his older brother on our bikes. On the way back, we ran into a massive storm. Going 60 miles per hour on the highway, I was deathly afraid of hydroplaning or crashing. We made it through the rain, soaked to the bone. My light wash blue jeans looked black from the water. We came through a town, obviously miserable, and 2 girls in the SUV next to us flew past us, flashing us out the window, pulled off, and were gone. I like motorcycles is what my friend said when we got home. It hasn't happened since 8 years, but I still like motorcycles. In high school, late 90s, had a best friend who was lesbian. She never saw a penis, asked me to show it to her, so I did. She showed my her pussy. Then word got out I'm cool with flashing my dong. Saw a lot of boobs and pussy for showing my dick. End of story. Fair trade enriches both parties. It's fundamental economics, people. Happened 2 weeks ago. I live alone and my usual ritual after arriving home from work is to strip naked and just roam throughout my apartment in the buff. Anyway, just as I was washing up dishes after dinner, I hear the front door handle turn. I live in a secure building and safety is never a concern. In walks the guy from upstairs and his dog, oblivious to the fact he got out the lift at the wrong level. The dog proceeds to run laps around the house while his owner screams at him to heel. It was a confusing time for all involved. Needless to say, I lock the door as soon as I arrive home these days. Walking in on someone naked has happened to me twice. The different issue is that I actually lived there and so did they. My roommates, female, and male, would strip down. One just liked being naked, the other would wash the clothes she was actually wearing at the time, and would expect me just to walk into our house. The first one would work out in the buff, with my equipment, in my room, and then freak out when I would see. The second didn't care and neither did I. That wasn't a bad place to live. My best friend in college had a girlfriend that he got to flash like 8 of us that were hanging out. She really liked it apparently because she started flashing me at most parties we were at. She even sought me out to flash me a few times when she heard I was there. She was cute, but it got strange after a while, especially the last time that she walked outside where I was alone, dropped her shorts to reveal her vagina with a tampon string hanging out and then just walked away. She later told me I make a goofy face when she flashed me, which is why she did it. Pretty sure a clothing store in Paris got a look at my ass once. The only change-going room was the first one in the line, and it had a curtain rather than a door. I had tried on some leggings, and whilst moving around I must have pulled the curtain back without realizing. I pulled the leggings down to take them off, and someone must have seen my full moon, was wearing a beige-colored thong, and hastily shut the curtain. Nobody said anything when I left the changing area, so I can only assume it was a staff member, who clearly didn't want my ass to be on display to the rest of the store. This wasn't me, but I was in the room. My dad was in the ICU with severe heart issues and our family got called in to say goodbye because the doctors thought he wasn't going to make it. He made it, it's all okay now. Anyway, my brother and I went in to see him and he was out of it, like drugged out on morphine I assume. He was making jokes to try and lighten the mood, probably to show us that he wasn't in pain. Then out of nowhere he looks at my brother, lifts up his blanket and flashed my brother and said, "You did this to me," in a really sad tone, then went to sleep. My brother and I looked at each other like, what the fuck was that? My dad doesn't remember it at all, but when we told him he felt really bad. But it's so funny now and we make jokes about it all the time. Really glad to hear your dad is okay. Seeing a close relative in such a condition is something I wouldn't even wish upon my worst enemies. My father had a stroke earlier this year. 4 days of not being able to move his right arm or leg. He made a full recovery, now only missing some finesse in his right hand, mainly when writing. When I was a teenager I went to Jewish sleepaway camp. There were huge double standards with what boys could wear, nothing all the time, and the girls were supposed to always look nice for the boys. It was supposed to be that we could wear pajamas to breakfast, so I was wearing a large shirt and pajama pants because that was what I slept in. I didn't notice that shirt was inside out. At this point my counselor starts ripping into me, telling me I had no self-respect and what if the other campers, including the boys, saw how much I didn't care about my appearance. I have no idea why, but my immediate reaction was to take off my shirt and put it back on the right way. I had no bra on. There were hundreds of people around. I flashed most of the camp. Looking back, I don't regret that choice. I think it was pretty badass given the environment. I wish I could say it was the last time people at camp gave me shit about what I wore, but it was far from the truth. As a side note, I left Judaism a few years later. Nothing all the time. This makes it sound like the boys were allowed to walk around naked, but I guess that's not the case. It mostly was the case. Like, I can't emphasize to you how much random penis I saw as a teenager. Beyond that, most of the boys were shirtless much of the time and it was fine. I got yelled at 2 years after this story for wearing just a bathing suit top going boating. I got flashed once on a night out by a girl who was getting her tits out for Jesus. I have fairly long hair and a beard, so I get called Jesus a lot. I appreciated it, but her boyfriend who pulled her shirt back down didn't seem too happy. That's when you double down and say you are truly blessed at the boyfriend and make the sign of the cross. I was walking uphill on a college campus in late spring. The young woman was riding down the hill on a rickety blue bike, wearing a sundress and carrying coffee. She started going too fast and her sundress flew open. Here's Lando Calrissian to show what her dress did. So that happened a few feet in front of me and she only had a lacy thong on, otherwise she skidded to a stop at the bottom of the hill with her shoes and managed to save her coffee. I was on grind, got messaged by a hot guy. He invited me over to his place for fun. So I walked over and went up to his apartment. Knocked on the door. Door opens and I see a large old naked fat guy in the doorway stroking his cock. He had perfect timing and came right after he opened the door. Then he said thanks and closed the door. I walked home considering my life choices. When I was about 15, there was this girl that lived in my apartment complex and she had a pretty slutty reputation attached to her. She was really into my best friend and he was all for it. One night, we were sitting on a wall and they were talking and I was just sitting there, third wheel in it, and all I hear is, "No, your friend is here." He said, "If I get to see them, he gets to see them." She said, "Fine," and whipped out the most glorious boobs I have ever seen. That was my first pair and hilariously enough, it was also my friend's first pair as well, despite him acting like he's seen a titty or two. Goddamn, they were perfect. I flashed my boobs at a high school tour group. It was late in the year. They would have been 17-19 in my first year at university. Thought I had a speedy getaway as I was about to board the bus. The bus sat there for 15 minutes. So did the tour group. It was one of their pit stops. And since we were there so long, I got a good look at the tour group. It was somehow 65% moms.